Coming up on episode 204 of Wheel Bearings, we talk about the Volkswagen ID.4 First Edition, the 2022 Volkswagen Taos, the 2022 Honda Civic sedan, and in the news, we cover the Peugeot 9X8 Le Mans Hypercar, Rimac taking over control of Bugatti, Stellantis' EV Day, a little more discussion about BMW's new EVs, the i4 and the iX, and we answer some listener questions. All coming up next. Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. This is episode 204 of Wheel Bearings. I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
I am Nicole Wakelin, and this week we'll go with Kelly Blue Book.
I am Roberto Baldwin, and let's say Engadget.
All right. So, let's start with you, Robbie. What have you been driving this week?
So I actually didn't drive this week. I drove this a few weeks ago, and I haven't talked about it. I haven't had a chance to put my video up, but the new Volkswagen Taos, the 2022 Volkswagen, it is their entry-level vehicle. It essentially, I guess it sort of replaces the Golf TSI. You know, you can only get the GTI and the Type R Golf here in the United States anymore. So I drove this on a drive program a few weeks ago. And what's nice about this vehicle is that it starts at about with destination, et cetera, $24,000 for a nice Volkswagen compact SUV. And so it's an entry-level vehicle, which I don't think there are enough of right now out in the world. And entry-level vehicles or like first cars like this, they're hugely important, I think, for a lot of people, because if you're young and this is your first new car, like this is the car you might have the longest out of all your cars. My second car was the longest I had, my first car was a 69 Datsun 2000 Roadster, and then I bought a 90 Honda Civic because I wanted to actually be able to get to my destinations that were further than 10 miles from my house. The Roadster was great, but I wanted to go places. But I had that Honda for 15 years. I had other cars, and I kept that Honda because it was my first entry-level car. And you make so many memories in these vehicles. These are sort of like you live and you work and you do schoolwork in these things. And it's sort of insane how expensive cars have gotten that we don't have more sort of inexpensive, good cars. And I feel like the Volkswagen Taos is an inexpensive, good car. I drove it around, I only drove it for the day. But yeah, it was comfortable. You could do it for long drives. You could, it has enough space for you and your friends. You can throw your stuff in the back. And whether you're, this is your first new car, or you need a second car, or you're buying a car for your kid. A lot of people want to buy a car for their kid, going off to college, or maybe they're in high school. And as, cars get more and more safe, they get safer as time progresses. They feel a little iffy about buying a used car. I mean, the Taos, it's a great entry-level little vehicle, and I really enjoyed it. And I do wish there were more options for folks out there who need something that doesn't cost the median price of, what is it now, $40,000? It was $35,000, and now it's gone up to $40,000.
It's about 40, yeah. And actually, last week when the automakers released their June sales reports, in Ford's sales report, they actually touted the fact that in June, their average transaction price was over $47,000.
Wow,
$47,000.
And part of that is because they've discontinued all their affordable cars.
I say they got rid of everything that like a kid would buy, like all the graduated college cars are gone.
The cheapest thing they have right now is the Escape, which starts around $24,000-$25,000. And goes up from there, until the Maverick shows up later this fall. That's going to start at $20,000. They're going to have these elevated prices because there's just nothing affordable from Ford.
Yeah, yeah. I think there is this sort of this dead zone right now, and in the entry level world where there, you have very few options, and there's a ton of like 30s and up vehicles, and that's why the median price is sort of gone crazy high. But a lot of people are still trying to find work after post COVID. And not everyone can afford. I mean, it's hard for me to wrap my head around buying something that's going to be $35,000, and I make my wife and I do pretty well. We do live in the Bay Area, so you have to like sort of like, adjust your like.
So after your housing costs go
Yeah,
up, you're basically living in poverty.
Yeah, after like if we lived anywhere else in the United States, we'd be like doing great. But we live in the Bay Area, so the cost of living is higher. But we get paid Bay Area money, so it kind of it sort of evens out, almost, sort of, kind of, maybe. Um, but yeah, it's really difficult I think for a lot of people to look and say, okay, I want to get a new car, and then then they get sucked into these 5-year lease, 5-year payment plans, which is gosh, that's insane unless you can get it like 0 API, and even then you're fighting against the depreciation. You're like, well, I hope that like what I'm paying like doesn't I'm not underwater on a car, which is sort of crazy. But
Yeah, well, I mean, especially if something happens to it, if you get in a crash or it gets stolen or something, and suddenly you find that you owe more on the car than it's worth, and the insurance company's only going to give you what its market value is.
yeah,
Although
and you're
right now you're probably okay because the market value of used cars has gone up so much.
Yeah.
For the time, for right now, for a little while at least, you're okay.
for right now, unless you own a 2004 Jaguar X-Type. I looked the Carvana price because someone had talked to me about their Carvana was giving them like a couple, like more money than they anticipated. So I threw the car, our Jaguar X-Type, our free car, on Carvana, and they offered me $270. So if you're looking for a cheap car, the Jaguar X-Type, 2004, well, just the Jaguar X-Type is out there if you can find one, and you don't mind all the check engine lights being on, all the time.
We just got a better offer on the car we just traded now that was probably about $4,000 more than what were offered for it 3-4 years ago, and 3-4 years ago, way less mileage and way less things that were wrong with it. I'm like,
Wow.
I don't know how this exactly worked, but okay, sure.
Yeah, no, it's.
I,
I'm sorry. Go on, Sam.
I was just gonna say, last night I was talking to my friend that I bought my Miata from 4 years ago, and he said, whatever you do, don't sell that car, because he's been looking for another one to buy, and he couldn't. I think the cheapest one that he's found, that's relatively low mileage, or first or second generation Miata, is like $12,000 or $13,000, which is substantially more than I paid him for that 1990 4 years ago. So I got a question for you. We've had over the last a couple of years, we've had several of these entry level crossovers come into the marketplace. The Nissan Kicks, the Hyundai Venue. There's a couple others out there. And they typically start around $19,000-$20,000. I think the Kicks still starts at about 19. Is this one 24 with delivery? Is that is it like $3,000-$4,000 more? Do you think it's worth that much more than those vehicles?
I like the Kicks a lot, and I like the Venue. I think the Nissan Kicks is probably the best car that Nissan's building right now. even with before the refresh, where the door panel inside was just like almost a flat piece of plastic. It's just like this flat, like, just shape. They're like, we need something to cover the innards of the door shape hole for the handle. I do think it does feel a bit more solid than the Kicks and the Venue. Well, it does feel more solid than the Kicks. The Venue, that might be a toss-up. I'm trying to remember when I drove the Venue. It's Hyundai's inexpensive vehicles are still, they're doing a great job. They're top-notch. So I think I think if you were looking for an inexpensive car, those are the three you should check out for, because everyone wants a compact SUV. I mean, the reality is that you should look at Golfs and actual cars for me, but I understand the market and understand what people want. And people, if you're looking for an entry level car, I would drive all three. I think the Golf's premium price tag is warranted for the most part. I think it feels a bit more solid. It feels a bit more like a car that's worth that extra cash. Um, but at the end of the day, that's really on the individual. And yeah, I would try all three and see what your budget allows. If you are really sort of, if it's tough, it's a tough call. I don't think yeah, I think you're going to be fine with the kicks of the venue. I think you're going to be happy without spending that extra money. If you do have the extra money, the Golf might, stepping up to the Golf might be pretty cool.
I mean, the Taos.
I'm sorry, the Taos, not the Golf. Sorry, I
Yeah.
got Golf on the brain.
What?
The
Okay.
Taos.
What? How, for a different comparison, what about the Mazda CX-30, which starts at 22,000, so with delivery 23,000. So it's about $1,000 less base price than the Taos.
I haven't driven the CX-30
Do you think
yet.
it?
But
Oh,
but
okay.
but based on Mazda's track record, oof, that's a toughie. Because I feel like the Mazda's probably going to be a bit more fun to drive. So I think if you're a driving enthusiast as opposed to a person who just drives to get who just needs a car to get from point A to point B, the Mazda's probably going to be the better choice. If you like a touchscreen versus that weird thing that Mazda has, then
Yeah, I mean, obviously for Nicole, the Mazda would be a
Right,
non-starter.
right, exactly.
I
It
think-
wouldn't even be under consideration.
and I think Mazda's like, hey, we're not using the touchscreen is in theory a good idea, but I think at the end of the day, most people are still plugging in their phones, and their phone, if they're using CarPlay or Android Auto, it's kind of a pain in the ass to use those systems without an actual touchscreen, because it's actually taking your eyes off the road more, because now you're like sort of like trying to navigate and figure out like where is the little selector going to go next as I try to like pick a song, or as opposed to just like, okay, I know
Yeah.
if I just stab in this general direction, it's gonna be okay. And I definitely do not think touchscreens are the end all bees knees, because a lot of times I sort of have to put my hand on top of the screen and then tap with like my thumb if the road's
to brace
rough,
it,
or,
yeah.
to sort of brace it so my hand isn't bouncing all over the place and I'm hitting all the wrong buttons in order just to do something. And they should be augmented with next song and volume control, and everything else should be an actual physical button. But I'll stop on that sort of weird tirade. Yeah,
Okay.
if you're a driver, Mazda is probably going to be the better option. If you're looking for something that's a bit more, you can't live without Google Maps, Waze, except Apple Maps for some whatever weird reason. If you can't live without those, maybe the Volkswagen will probably be a better match for you.
Okay. Alrighty. What about you, Nicole? What have you been driving?
I am driving the all-new 2022 Honda Civic sedan in the strangest color. Okay, you guys both have to look up this color because it's the weirdest color. It's called Lunar Silver. And it basically is like this super weird pale blue thing that everybody who's seen it is like, what's that color? Like, I don't know why. It's not... It feels like a car color my grandma would drive. I don't like it. But aside from the very weird color that does nothing for the car, move on to more important stuff. But don't get lunar silver. It's not an attractive color. It's great. I mean, it's a Honda. It has that quality interior. It's never overly fancy and overly done. It just has exactly what it needs to be comfortable and useful. I have the Touring, which is their top trim. And it also comes with the 1.5 liter turbocharged engine. That's 180 horsepower and it has a CVT. It's more than enough to get this moving. I mean, it's easy to accelerate onto the highway. You never feel like it's struggling to keep up, and it's really quiet. CVTs, they still can produce a noisy ride, especially when you're heavy on the accelerator. This was not. And it also handled really well. And although it's not wintertime, so you can't see what it's going to do when the snow falls. We've had some torrential rain here lately, and I made the mistake of planning to go out to dinner just as we got like, hunker down, tornadoes, wind, rain, floods, don't go out. And I'm like, well, that doesn't help me halfway to dinner. And it was dumping, and there was just water everywhere, really heavy rain buffeting the car and wind, and it handled beautifully. I was actually really impressed. It was a point where I thought to myself, okay, if it was snowing, I would feel pretty confident driving this car. I felt like it handled really well. It's plenty roomy. I mean, my husband is 6'3". He pushes the seat back, so normally only someone who's exceptionally small can sit behind him. But no, you can still sit behind him in this and not feel like your knees are squished up against the back of the seat. It has a good sized trunk and it has good features. There's not a lot to complain about other than the color. And it comes with good standard safety. This one has like leather seats and a Bose audio system. It has a 9-inch color touchscreen. Thank you, Honda, that I liked. So, I mean, overall,
And a volume knob.
And a volume knob. Yes, it has a volume knob. So overall, it's a good offering. I mean, this is I think the 11th generation of the Civic sedan. So it's been around for a while and it's seen a lot of changes over the years. And I feel like they continue to iterate it. They make improvements. It's nothing dramatic. It's not like you suddenly get into the Civic and think, oh my gosh, holy new vehicle. I'd never know, this was the Civic. It's completely changed. It just moves it forward in a good and sort of predictable, but a good way. Adding a little bit of features, adding a little bit of style, adding a little bit of everything. And it's not the pricing. You were talking about pricing on cars. Now this is the top Civic trim that you can get, and it comes in at $28,300. So, it's not exactly affordable. It's not cheap, but it's also not crazy expensive. And if you wanted to forgo, leather seats and some of the fancy, you can get it for a good chunk less. I think the base models, you'll probably save a good, couple of $1,000s. So depending on what you're going to buy, you can get into an affordable, comfortable, spacious sedan that's not going to break the bank. So if someone's looking for a sedan, talking about first-time buyers, the Civic is not a bad choice.
Yeah, I mean, we have a 2017 Civic, so that's the previous generation, and this one, particularly looking at the interior, it does look a little more upscale than ours.
Mm-hmm.
And that base price on the LX, 21.7 to 22.7, with delivery, I think it's certainly it's more affordable than the Taos starting point. And Honda, I think last year or the year before, they made their Honda sensing package with all the ADAS stuff standard equipment. So you get, even on the base version of the Civic, you get radar, adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist, and also blind spot monitoring. So I think that's having all that stuff on there, even at that base price, I think is a pretty good value.
It does make it a value, I just got a new car, and one of the things I thought I was going to be paying more for my insurance, our old car was a 2015, and my insurance dropped significantly. And I'm like, how did my insurance, I'm like, what was it? She's like, it's because there's so much standard safety on the car you just bought compared to the car you had. It actually brought down it was like $40 a month that it brought down my insurance costs. It wasn't insignificant, because I had that moment of like, wait, what? Are you sure we got this right? But she's like, no, it's because of the safety. And it's not like we were driving a car with nothing before, but just that change from what you think was available 4 or 5 years ago standard, there wasn't a heck of a lot. What's standard now, that's a big difference. And it's enough to, save you a few bucks and help make your insurance a bit more affordable too. And you don't have to pay extra to get those things you mentioned, Sam. It's going to be there whether you decide to go with the top trim or the very bottom, you're going to get that safety.
I've owned two Honda Civics, a 90 and a 94, and both of them were essentially bulletproof. You could do anything to those things, and whenever you get into a Honda, as soon as you just closing the door, you're like, oh yeah, this is Honda quality. This is what you're at. So I feel like that money spent on that Civic, even the trim level, you're probably going to be like, okay, this is going to be a while around for a while, and yeah, adding the sensing, the Honda sensing as standard. I think everyone adding more and more of these things as standard is so incredibly important. I mean, it's nice when you have adaptive cruise control when you're stuck in traffic, but it's nicer when you have the auto stopping when you're about to smash into somebody or whatnot. And that I mean, those are huge safety gains for a lot of people.
Yeah, and there is what you're saying about like shutting the door and you're like, okay, this is a Honda. There is a solidity to this. It's it's a compact car. It's a sedan. It's not a huge vehicle. And sometimes, like when you were talking about the kicks and the door on the inside of the kicks, the door trim, it had that really like, oh, good Lord. Like it felt its price, let's say. It felt
Yes.
cheap. It felt like you were trying to save money. This doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't, like I said, 28 grand. It's not an outrageously priced vehicle, but it feels solid. It feels secure. It's got a nice quiet ride. You don't get that sense at all that like, okay, I'm in some kind of cheapo compact car that I'm just driving because I want great fuel economy. No, you get the sense that you bought something that's quality, that's going to be around for a while. We've had two Civics, both of them when there was a Civic hybrid, and it was when gas prices were just outrageous. And they both were driving perfectly fine when we decided to turn them in. And we had two kids who beat up the car like you wouldn't believe. They are hardened interiors. They drove a wheelbarrow into the outside of it at one point. But nope, car's like, that's fine. I have a big dent in my door now, but I am ready. Like they just keep going and they don't start to feel their age. Like they really hold up really well. So if you want to get a car and you want to hold on to it, go get yourself a Honda. You're going to have it until you're just sick of it.
Until you were like, well, I want something different.
I just want something different. I can't drive this anymore.
That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that my wife doesn't get sick of it for a long time, so I don't have to make any more car payments for a while. So far it's doing great.
Good.
4 years, a little over 4 years, and it's doing great. So can't complain. And I did my driver's ed in a Honda Civic back in the early 80s, an 81 Civic with a 4-speed manual, a little hatchback. Yeah, it was great.
Nice.
I love those.
It was a tiny little car.
It's so small. I love those. I feel like I'm a Honda fanboy, even though I don't own a Honda at this point. Those old, especially the old ones, they were like little weird little golf carts. Like it was just like with these fun little transmissions, and I would just, my dad brought my sister and brother an early 80s Honda Accord, which was just slightly bigger than the Civic, and they didn't want to work on it. They didn't want to do anything with it. It just needed a starter. So every once in a while, my dad would ask me to drive it around, start it up, drive it around, and just keep the battery charged. And I absolutely adored that car. And my sister and brother, you're in high school, they wanted to be cool, and it was the 90s, and an early 80s Honda Civic or Honda Accord wasn't cool. But man, I'm sort of sad the day my dad sold that thing.
I didn't think of it until you guys started talking. We've had two Civics. We had a CRV back in the day, and I know this car was like, they didn't even last very long, but we had a Honda Element. We loved that thing.
Oh, yeah.
That was brilliant when you had kids because the doors opened in such a way that you could always get to them in the back.
The rear hinged half doors.
Oh my gosh, you could sit in the back and you could like sit there and use that space. And when kids made a mess, as kids do, you're like, break out the hose, whoosh. I loved that thing. They marketed it sort of towards like, this is for the outdoorsy type who's going to put a bike in the back. I'm like, oh, heck no. This is for the parents who have kids who drop food and get sick and make a mess and have snow and all sorts of junk on their boots. Oh man, I loved that car. We only traded it because the fuel economy was atrocious, and that's when we got the hybrid Civic instead.
Yeah. They're sort of. My brother still owns one, and I have made him promise me that if he ever sells it, I get rights of first refusal.
That's a good
I
promise.
Absolutely. And there's one on my block, like across the street and 2 houses down, they have an Element, and I'm just waiting for them to put it on sale. Because it's the perfect, like you could throw we have the dogs, I have my bands, I have all my art projects that I'm working on. I have to go to Home Depot and get mulch, of course.
Does
and you can
everything.
Do all that. I'm
Yep.
not. My friend, her sister sold hers because it was gutless, and I'm like, that's not what that's about.
No, that's not why you bought the Element. I wish they still had an Element. I love that.
If it's
Bring back
gutless,
the
you
Element.
just go find a used VTEC engine and drop it in there.
There you go.
Yeah, then those
good.
were like super cheap, at least at the time. I haven't looked. I haven't researched VTEC engines in a while, but I remember you could just buy them for like $400, and we'd swap them over the weekend. It was nuts, crazy times.
Yeah. All right. Well, I too had a Volkswagen crossover. Actually, I still have it because this was supposed to be picked up 2 days ago, but the Genesis GV80 that they were bringing to me on Tuesday got a flat tire on the way here, and they had to take it back to the shop, and they've been waiting to get a new tire, and I still haven't heard back from Drive Shop
Wow.
about when I'm going to get it. So anyway, I've got the Volkswagen ID.4. Which is the first of VW's purpose-built EVs for the North American market. They launched the ID.3 last September, I think, in Europe, and then late in the year they launched the ID.4, which is basically the same vehicle but slightly taller, slightly more crossover-ish looking. Although I had it parked, I've got it parked right now next to a 2015 Kia Rio in the driveway. And it actually doesn't look much bigger than the Kia on the outside. But on the inside, I mean, it feels huge because you've got that flat floor. It's an EV. I'm 5'11", and if I get set seat where I want and get in this behind me, I have like several inches of knee clearance in the back. So I mean, there's a lot of room in this thing. Overall, it's really good to drive. I mean, it drives like a Volkswagen, which is what you expect, and even more so in most respects, because the default for VW's MEB electric platform is rear-wheel drive, so rear motor, and then they're going to have dual motor all-wheel drive versions as well, but they haven't launched that yet for the ID.4. This one that I've got is the first edition, which is now sold out, and it goes for $44,000. And the main distinction between the first edition and the other ones is the white steering wheel and instrument pod and bezel around the center display. But other than that, it's basically the same. It's fairly loaded. Because it's only a single motor, it's only 201 horsepower, and it's a fairly hefty vehicle, actually, even with in single motor rear drive configuration. It's almost 4,500 pounds, which for a vehicle that's got a comparatively compact footprint seems like a lot. And compared to some other crossovers of similar size, it's quite a bit heavier. But the torque, the instant torque of the electric motor makes up for a lot of that. It doesn't feel nearly as quick as something like the Polestar 2, which has two motors and twice the power, but it's still quite more than acceptable. Got really good drivability. The only real complaint I have about the driving dynamics is the steering doesn't really have any feedback. It feels kind of dead. Although the effort is fine, it just doesn't really give you any feedback when you're going around corners. But it's roomy. It's great to drive. I like the way it looks. I like the new design language that VW is applying to their EVs with the signature lighting they've got on the ID.3 and the ID.4, and it's going to be on some the other ones they've got coming out. And I like this one is the blue with the silver trim around the greenhouse, which is, I think it's a nice two-tone combination. It's got the full glass roof, which is I prefer to drive with the sunroof open if it had one, but it's fixed in place, but that's fine. The two main complaints with this thing, there's first of all, there's no front trunk, and that's, I think you can make the case for it in the case of the MEB, because when you look at the proportions, it's got a very short front end. They moved the base of the windshield forward, and even though there's no engine in there, it's a fairly short front end, and they pack in all the climate control and the power electronics and other stuff in there. So there's not really room in there for storage. But there is an extra like deep little storage area in the back under the rear cargo area where you can throw the charging cable. so I can get by without the front trunk because there's a big cargo area in the back. The other main complaint about this thing is the infotainment system and primarily the software performance of the infotainment system. The user interface is fine. It's fairly standard modern user interface, grid of 8 icons, and it's a good size screen. I think it's a 10-inch screen. So nice big touch targets, fairly easy to hit. Although even, when you're driving on bumpy roads, same thing as you were talking about, Robbie, earlier, trying to hit the touch targets, trying to brace my hand, to hit the touch targets. But, that is what it is. But the responsiveness of the system is not great. Sometimes it's fine. And the thing is, it's inconsistent. Sometimes it responds fine. A lot of the time it's kind of sluggish. Sometimes it does some weird things like there's no volume knob. There's capacitive controls to get into the climate control and the volume and adjust the temperatures. And the volume control is centered just below the screen. And there's basically two areas where you tap, one on the right to raise the volume, on the left to lower the volume. And every once in a while it will randomly, when I go to change the volume, instead of bringing up the audio volume, it brings up the voice operation volume, which I'm not even sure what that is. And so I'm trying to change the volume, and it's just not responding properly. And it also takes quite a long time to boot up when you first get in the car. To get to a point where you can actually do anything with the screen takes a while. VW does have over-the-air software update capability for this thing. And they just put out a release a couple of days ago, actually, that they're going to start pushing out OTA updates to the ID vehicles, starting with vehicles in Europe. And so hopefully they'll have some updates to the infotainment software soon that improve the performance and the reliability of it. It did kind of hang up completely on me a couple of times where it just didn't respond to anything at all. But aside from that, the rest of the driving experience was good. I drove around for several days. When I first got it, I got it fully charged up, drove it for several days, drove about 230 miles, and still had 25 miles of range left showing before I went to the EA station and charged it up, and got from like 7% state of charge to 85% in about 30 minutes. It's rated 125, I think 125 kilowatts charging capability. It was doing like 123, 124 until it got to about 40 or 50% and then started tapering off. So you can charge it fairly quickly. It does have support for plug and charge. When I went to the EA station, the first charger I plugged it into, it refused to authenticate, so I moved over to the one next to it, plugged it in, boom, worked fine. It authenticated, just started charging. I didn't have to tap, do anything with the credit cards or anything. VW is giving you 3 years of free DC fast charging with the ID.4. And now that the first editions are sold out, they're selling the ID.4 Pro as the first regular model. Those are starting at $40,000, and then you get the $7,500 tax credit on that. And I think there's supposed to be a shorter range, smaller battery version coming later on, as well as a dual motor all-wheel drive version. So you'll probably have options with sticker prices between about $35,000 and $45,000 by probably the first part of next year. So overall, I like it. I just, hopefully they'll do something soon about the software. And I guess prior to the launch of the ID.3, the launch was actually delayed for several months last year in Europe. Apparently it was primarily because of software issues. And VW is doing a lot of this stuff in-house, which a lot of automakers are starting to do. And I think they still have some learning to do about developing a lot of the software in-house. There's still a lot of challenges. But if you're looking for an EV, this is one I would definitely take a look at. Although, if you can wait, a few more months, you might also want to hold off and look at the Hyundai Ioniq 5, which I don't think any of us have tried yet, but it's a similar sized vehicle, and it potentially has some advantages over this one, like even faster charging. It's got 350 kilowatt charging capability, and a little bit different styling direction for that one. So there's a lot more options coming. But if you're looking for an EV right now, if you can find an ID.4 at a Volkswagen dealer, which I haven't looked at the VW dealer yet to see what their inventories are like, but if it's anything like other automakers right now, it could be a problem to actually get your hands on one. But it's definitely worth a look.
I've only ever seen one, like on the road here, as you're saying. I feel like I need to drive by my local Volkswagen dealership, but I've literally seen one.
I did a video for Tom's Guide. I think the review's coming out this week for the vehicle. But we were at an EA station, and a person who just bought the ID.4. It was their first time charging while I was at the station. I was like, oh, this is what you need, because there's an issue where the if you're trying to authenticate and it doesn't, the charge hose, the cable, there you go, not
Cable,
hose.
charge hose.
I'm like, not hose.
I'm going to call it a charge hose from now on.
Charge
How long
hose.
is the charge
It's
hose?
flowing.
It's a hose through which electrons flow.
Yeah, the electron hose. The electron hose got she couldn't detach it, and you have to like unlock the car. Even if the car's unlocked, you have to unlock it again. So it keeps people from sort of like coming up to your car and unlock and pulling the electron hose out of your vehicle. And so I've seen more and more of them on the road. I've seen more Mach-E's on the road recently than I've seen ID.4s. But it is sort of, but again, I live in the Bay Area, so that's you got to take that into account because we're all hippies up here. But yeah, I really like the ID.4, and again that latency on that infotainment system, and like you said, sometimes it's fine. And sometimes you're just like, oh, I just don't even want to deal with this. I'm just like, what is happening? Yeah. Why is this? Like, you're just like pushing, you're like, oh, forget it. And you just like plug in your phone, and then I use, CarPlay or whatever. And because I'm just like, all right, I've tested this enough to know that things are not going as well as it should be.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to my friend Stephanie Brinley about a month or so ago when she had it. And she had just gotten it the day before, and she was telling me that, it's like there was no start stop button, and when she got out of the car, the radio, the audio would keep playing until you get up off the seat. It was using the sensor in the seat. When you put it in park and you get out, that's when it turns off the audio system. Mm-hmm. And I didn't talk to her after that, but a couple of days later, she found the start stop button. It was the same thing with me. A couple of days after I had it, I was looking from the passenger side, and I realized that it's actually on the side of the steering column where you'll never see it. So you don't actually have to turn it on and off. When you put it in park and you get out, it'll turn everything off, and when you lock the doors, it'll be shut off. But that's the other thing. When you lock the doors, most cars, when you lock the doors, it gives you a little beep of the horn to let you know that it's responded. Nothing, no sound from the ID.4. It just locks.
There's not like a setting where you can make it beep at you, like somewhere buried.
Not that I could find.
No, okay.
It's all.
There probably is somewhere in the software, but I couldn't find it.
Right time. Yeah, that off on button is great if you're shooting video, because I would get up and we would want like the lights on or whatever to like do something while we're shooting video, so you can see the light, and you'd get up and you're like, okay, we got to turn on the car, and I'm like, it's a whole, and I was like, trying to explain to the videographer, I'm like, it's a whole thing. Like, usually you get out and the car just turns off. He's like, well, how do you, I'm like, fortunately there's a button here so we can turn this on. But yeah, if you don't know it's there, it's sort of, it's there in the column, and it's sort of hidden, and it's only, I guess for if you're shooting video.
I guess. Maybe if things go completely haywire with the software, maybe there's probably some sequence with that you have to use to reboot the thing, but or something like that.
Tap it 3 times and then do the contra code on the steering wheel, up, down, down, left, right, select start, AB 1 1 2 3, tap, spin around. There you go.
And the controls on the steering wheel are interesting too, because they're capacitive touch buttons on there, but there's haptic feedback, so it's like using an iPhone 7 or 8 that has the home button that doesn't actually move.
Mm-hmm.
Or a modern MacBook, with a touchpad that doesn't actually move. So when you click it, it gives you haptic feedback that simulates that it's clicking, but it's not actually moving.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the buttons on the steering wheel on this thing. So it takes a little getting used to.
I have a question about that. Did you find you ever hit it by accident? I can't remember which vehicle I had that had haptic buttons, and it would just feel like I was the touch buttons. I'd be turning the wheel. I've accidentally swiped my finger, and I have now cranked the volume to 12 as I'm trying to turn, and now I can't crank it back down because I'm in the middle of turning the car. Did you find that you didn't hit them by accident?
No, because it's more like if you've driven a recent Audi with a touchscreen, they have haptic feedback in the touchscreen, so you actually have to press it. So it's not like just tapping on your phone screen where it's actually looking for a bit of pressure.
Got it.
So it's kind of more like the 3D touch on an iPhone.
Yeah, because that was my big
Apple
complaint
Watch.
the one time I had it. It was just so easy. Like you're just driving and you slide your hand down the steering wheel and your fingertips brush against something. You're like, I didn't mean to change anything. Just repositioning my hands, folks. Leave everything alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not a problem because, like I said, you do have to give it a little bit of pressure before it actually responds. So.
One last thing about the ID.4 is I do appreciate I think it was the first edition is 250 miles, but I felt like during regular driving, just regular, not testing it, not like doing, 0 to 60 tests or whatever, but like regular days when I was just driving it, you could probably get like 260 out of that thing if you were just sort of like cruising around town, which I think the whole VW group is doing. I think they're sort of underreporting their range. Probably for good reason, because the whole reason they're super into EVs right now is because of, a little thing we all like to call Dieselgate. But I think, I think the whole VW group sort of push for it. It's 250, but like, sort of like they come up and whisper to you, it's really 260.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I did 230, and stopped at the charger, and it was showing 25 miles left on there. And most probably 2/3 to 3/4 of that was actually highway driving because I had to go to Detroit a couple of times. So it was majority was highway driving, and that's you're going to do worse on the highway with an EV because of the aero. I think getting as long as it's not too hot, and you have to use the air conditioning too much. But even that, I was using the AC, and I think in ideal conditions, you could easily get, I think, 275 out of it, if you're not being too aggressive with your driving, if it's mostly around town driving. I guess that is the one other thing I would complain about a little. For the shift, it's got this big thing on the side of the instrument cluster. You twist it forward at the top to select drive, and twist it, back to select reverse, and push it in to get neutral. If you push it forward twice, you can go from drive to B to braking mode. That's where you get your higher regen, but it's not, the regen's not as aggressive as, like, say on the Mustang or on a Nissan Leaf or on a BMW i3 when you're using one pedal driving. So it won't actually bring the car to a complete stop. And I've come to really like strong regen. So I would prefer an option to have a little bit stronger regen, but it's not there right now on this vehicle.
Yeah, I think the one pedal driving, and it's fun to, I will tell people this, it is fun to gauge how well one pedal driving works and how many intersections it takes for you to come to a stop right at the line. And I think for all the vehicles that are out there right now, I think the Polestar 2 does it best. And I'm saying that because on the second intersection, I was able to come to a stop right on the line.
I remember trying that for
Excellent.
the very first time in the Nissan Leaf, and they're like, "Yeah, you just this one pedal driving," and I'm like, "Okay," and I stopped like 8 feet back. I'm like, "Boom! Oh wait, that was okay. I get how this works." The next intersection, I'm like, must actually brake. Okay, I can't figure this out.
It takes a few.
It takes a little time. And then you get it, you're like, I get how this works. Yeah.
You just gotta learn that feel for it. Mm-hmm. I remember the first time I drove a car with strong regen like that was the Mini E, the original, like the pilot program Mini E's that they built back in 2008. And at the LA Auto Show, they were doing some drives with it. And, I pulled out of the garage at the LA Convention Center. And the first time I took my foot off the accelerator, it's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that level of decel with it because it was so aggressive. But, within a few intersections, I kind of had the feel for it. Smartphones have gotten way more expensive over the past decade, and all it takes is one impact on a hard floor to make you wish you had spent a few bucks to put a case on it. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a case for your phone, and it only costs a few dollars a month. Nicole, Robbie, and I travel a lot for our work, and we spend a lot of time in hotels, coffee shops, airplanes, and of course the Delta Sky Club. Connecting to the Wi-Fi in any public places with shared Wi-Fi puts your data at risk because bad actors could be intercepting what you send and using it to steal from you. It only takes some cheap hardware to intercept Wi-Fi data, and even a smart preteen can do it. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per victim selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops the bad guys by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN uses state-of-the-art encryption that would take a supercomputer up to 1 billion years to crack. I have ExpressVPN on all my devices, including a MacBook Pro, Windows laptops and desktops, and Android and iOS phones and laptops, or tablets. When I want to be secure, I just launch the app, click once to connect, and my data is secure. As I said, I travel a lot for my work, and I have to connect to countless public Wi-Fi networks in many countries. I have ExpressVPN on all my connected devices so that whoever else is on the same network can't see any of my data. That's important because I often have to check banks, credit card accounts, and transmit client data that might be sensitive, as well as filing articles on news that might be under embargo. ExpressVPN protects all of it, and I've been paying for my own account for years. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. That's expressvpn.com/wheelbearings, and you can get an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/wheelbearings. All right, let's do some news.
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 So, Peugeot, part of the Stellantis group, this week unveiled their new race car that they're going to take to Le Mans next year. It's part of the new Le Mans Hypercar class, and it's a hybrid, like many of these modern prototypes are, but it looks really different from most modern prototype race cars. Have you had a chance to take a look at the photos of this thing?
It looks very fancy.
It looks fantastic. It looks like a futuristic car in a video game. When you're playing, some sort of
like something out of Gran Turismo.
Yeah, like the next generation crazy supercar. This is the car.
What is up with those taillights? Are they literally just like pieces that stick out, like little wings?
They're little stabby bits.
They're like little stabby bits. I'm trying to get. I don't think they have a close up of those, but they're like little stabby bits.
No, they don't. They only have a few photos of it. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, for those that haven't seen it, and we'll include the pictures in the show notes, but it's kind of like on current generation Mustangs, where they have the three, sort of the blade, the three-dimensional taillights, but only more so. They're much larger and thinner.
They really stick out.
They look like three blades on each side. And I'll be curious to see how well those hold up on the racetrack, when they're fender to fender, racing. See how durable those are. But the really unique thing about this, do you notice anything that appears to be missing from this car compared to most modern race cars?
A hella large wing. There is no big giant wing attached to the back. The Peugeot says, "Hey, we figured it out. We don't need a giant wing. We can do it without it.
Stinking wing.
We have aerodynamics on our side without a wing." So we'll see
how
that
when you
works
look at it, there's that one thing that's like the totally just head-on angle, and it's funny the way those little side pieces go that run along the body. It looks like there's a wing when you look from the front. You can totally see how the design worked. It totally looks like it until you look at the side or the back. Look at those fancy engineers with the aerodynamic knowledge and stuff.
lot of time in the wind tunnel and doing CFD simulations with this thing. Yeah, the rules for the hypercar class. There's some things that they're very specific about. Like they significantly restrict what they call the lift to drag ratio. So how much downforce you can get versus how much aerodynamic drag the body has, and it's limited to like 4-to-1. And so if you look at the other hypercars so far, like the Toyota and the Glickenhaus that are out there, they both still have big wings, but because these things are designed to run at Le Mans, where they've got these really long straights, really high speeds, they're set up for relatively low drag. And I think Peugeot figured out that they could generate enough downforce just from the underbody of this thing that they could get by without a wing. And we'll see late this year when they actually start testing it on the track. This is just a mock-up, photos of a mock-up that they've released this week. But I hope that that this thing actually works, because I would love to see something so different running in this. There's going to be some interesting stuff coming to the hypercar class over the next couple of years. Ferrari's joining this class, and there's some others. And I'm just glad to see somebody doing something creative, and hopefully this one works better than the last really creative Le Mans prototype, which was the Nissan GTR Nismo back in 2015. I don't know if either of you remember that one. It was a pretty wild looking car. No, I think you're thinking of the Mercedes CLR from the late 90s.
Yeah.
That they got airborne a few times, and they finally withdrew them from the race. No, the Nissan was this. It was unlike most modern race cars. It was front engine. It was actually front wheel drive, and had a really unique aerodynamic concept. It was meant to be a hybrid, but they never got the hybrid system working right. So it had really big front tires and really skinny rear tires. It was really hyper optimized for Le Mans. And then the bodywork, had these channels for the air to flow through. So it would put down, all the power through the front wheels, and it was supposed to be really low drag, and similar to this in terms of generating downforce with the body. But the hybrid system didn't work, and it was a complete disaster at Le Mans. And like 3 weeks after the race, Nissan pulled the plug on the whole program, and instead of continuing to develop it, they just said, forget it, we're done.
Wow.
And has never been seen since.
That's a lot of money to be like.
That's a lot of money. It must have been so horrifically bad. They're like, we spent a ton of money. Oh no, we'd have to spend a ton more. Done.
Yeah. Like, let's just make a regular car. Let's make the kicks instead.
Well, Nissan. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, here's the. I'll drop it in the Slack here so you can see it. It's definitely a unique car. It's got a very different look from any other modern Le Mans prototype.
Look at the wing on that thing.
All right.
But okay.
Yeah, it's got a wing. It's got a wing, all right. All right. Back to EVs. Rimac, the little Croatian startup that has garnered some attention in recent years for some crazy fast electric supercars. Matej Rimac, the founder and CEO, they have taken control of Bugatti from Volkswagen. They basically, Volkswagen handed it to them and said, "Here, you take it." And, 'cause
we don't want this. You take it. I'm not going to try it.
But, Bugatti, while they have created some pretty amazing cars over the last 20 years, really only two cars. They've only had two main models, the Veyron and the Chiron, the current one. It's often referred to as Ferdinand PX Folly, because he bought the rights to the Bugatti name in the late 90s when he was still CEO of Volkswagen, and wanted to build the ultimate car. And I think what's a Chiron go for now? I think base price is something like $2.5 million.
$1 million.
Times 2.5.
Yeah, I think the Veyron, I think over about a 9-year production run, I think they built 450 of them. I think 300 coupes and 150 convertibles, and they're currently doing the Chiron. So I guess what they did was they set up a joint venture between Porsche and Rimac, with Rimac owning 55% of the joint venture, and Porsche owns 45%. And that joint venture company, Volkswagen just handed over control, just transferred the shares of Bugatti to this new joint venture. So Rimac has control. So it's going to be interesting. What do you think that Rimac might do with Bugatti?
In the press, there were interviews and they were saying, we're not going to just go out and make an electric Bugatti, and we're not going to make, we're still going to have a gas-powered Bugatti out, coming, and we're still going to have an EV Rimac. But I think in the future, I think they're going to have something interesting. I think it's Bugatti as part of the Volkswagen group was always kind of, you understood why it was there, but at the same time it was just so I don't know. It's such a niche automaker for Volkswagen to own, and they already have a performance brand. They already have Porsche. And so having Bugatti was always just like, hey, by the way, we also
and Lamborghini.
And Lamborghini, yeah. And like, oh, sorry, and Lamborghini. Sorry, Lamborghini. But they have two performance brands, and one is a supercar maker, and then they have Bugatti, which is making supercars for not just the ultra rich, but the incredibly insane ultra rich. I've been offered a chance to drive a Bugatti a few times, and each time it hasn't worked out. But also each time the idea of driving something that's worth like more than the entire block where I live is worth is insane. So I can see why they were sort of shopping it around, and I think there was rumors for a while that Rimac was going to pick them up, and I think this is a better fit because it's two brands that are just sort of two insane brands with like a performance brand as like kind of a base in there with Porsche. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they have in about 10 years. I think it's going to be a while before we see something like really just where they merge both companies into one, I don't know, $7 billion car.
Yeah, because it's not like these are companies that are pumping out like new cars every, we have 7 different models in our lineup, and it's been 3 years and it's time for a refresh, and 3 years and time for an all new. There's such a long time frame and so few vehicles. It has to take a while before we really see them mesh together into one giant, expensive, crazy car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Bugatti's averaged up something like 50 cars a year that they build. So it's definitely very small numbers. So, and I think they're planning to build about the same number of Chirons that they did Veyrons. So, it's still got quite a few years left in its product cycle. So maybe by the time the Chiron's done, maybe they'll think of something to do with the brand.
Something with an on at the end. The Ion. The Ion. I'm going to call it. The next Bugatti's going to be called an Ion, or the electric Bugatti's going to be called the Ion. There, I'm done.
Is that too close to Ionic?
No,
because people could easily get confused between whatever the Bugatti would be and your typical Hyundai.
Yeah,
Ioniq 5.
Somebody going into it. Going into a Bugatti dealer with the intention of buying an Ioniq 5 and ends up with an Ion. Yes.
Surprise!
Ooh,
this is a lot more
that'll
than
be
I anticipated.
$4 million, please.
All right, sure, I'll buy it.
I thought they said this was $40,000, not $4 million.
Well, dealer markups, man, they're crazy.
They're cray-cray.
Yeah. All right. Last night, as we're recording, I went to Detroit. BMW held another event like the one you went to in LA a few weeks ago, and they had the i4 and the iX there. That's a lot of grill on both of those cars that doesn't do anything.
It is a lot of. They said they put sensors behind them, but you don't need that grill for those sensors. It's not like the sensors are the size of a I don't know the size of a Nissan Versa. How's that? You don't need sensors the size of a Nissan Versa. That's how big the grills are.
The size of an entire Versa. Yeah.
But I think the thing that surprised me more is when I realized, and I hadn't realized this before when I was reading about it. Both of these cars have proportions not altogether different from other BMWs, which means they have a fairly long hood. The cabin is set back. And it's got that kind of sporty vehicle proportion to them. But neither of them has a front trunk, despite having a really long hood. And in fact, on the iX, turns out you can't even open the hood. Only if it's not there is no release for the hood.
Is there even does it look like there's a hood?
For the dealer to do it.
So
yeah. There's a cut line there and everything. So there is a hood, but the owner cannot open it. You have to take it to a dealer. So basically it's just for service access to stuff and to the motor, the front motor, and
so they don't want you to ever touch it. Like, do not touch this. We have sealed it. You may not go in here. Out.
Well, it's like the i8. You couldn't open the i8 either. The hood on the i8, but it's fun.
That's true. But I mean, that was a much shorter front end.
That's true. On the iX, when you want to put washer fluid in, the logo, the BMW logo, pops up. And you pour it in there. Someone's going to try to put gas in there. There's going to be a story. Someone's going to borrow their friend's iX. They can't figure out where to put gas, and they're going to put it in that thing, and then the windshield's going to catch fire. But
aside from the grill, I think the i4 actually looks really good. I'm not crazy about the iX. I think it's a little weird looking, but the i4 looks good. So
the profile of the i4 is really nice.
As long as you approach it from the back or the side, I think it's great. Just don't ever walk up to it from the front.
And then they don't need, and they just unveiled the new 2 Series without a manual transmission. Boo! But the grill on the front of that thing is really small. I was like, okay, BMW will not back down on the grill, but for some reason on the 2 Series they're like, we don't need a big grill on this car. Maybe because it would have eaten the whole car. Who knows?
It would just be a grill.
True,
no windshield. It goes right up in the windshield. You can only see through from one direction because it's grilled. It goes all the way up.
Yeah.
Just fold it right into the hood.
Right over the top, goes back down around the back of the car.
You can call them diffusers. Once they hit the back of the car, it's diffusers. What's that? The extension of the grill? Nah, they're diffusers once they get over the C
once
pillar.
they cross the midpoint.
Yeah. Once you hit the B pillar, it's a diffuser. Is that how?
All right, we got one final EV item today, and that's this morning. Stellantis held their EV day that they had been promising for a while, and released some more information. Either of you have a chance to look at what they talked about?
I'm looking now. I am reading through the giant press release.
I think it's fun because I like the direction Stellantis is going, because of all the automakers, I think FCA has never encountered an emission standard that it didn't hate. They were just like, no, we're putting big giant engines. They're like, oh, we're gonna have these emissions. No, these are horrible. And even the Fiat 500e. I mean, they were losing a lot of money on that. They were I think they were saying like $14,000, but that was the best Fiat, the 500e. And they were telling you, the CEO actually said, don't buy this car. Please do not buy this car because I'm losing money. And I'm sure he probably said it with an Italian accent. And I'm not going to try that because that seems offensive. But I like the idea that the Stellantis, which Fiat, Peugeot got married and came up with the name that you would find in Greek mythology. They're coming
or on a pharmaceutical ad.
Ooh, the new
I'm sorry,
Stellantis.
it just sounds like a drug. I'm sorry, no matter how much I try to get by it, I can't.
Stellantis may cause diarrhea.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah.
Check to see if Stellantis is right for you.
Don't use Stellantis if you're on it.
See, it's so easy for us to riff on this,
Oh, okay. Now I can't. Now I can't get away from it. But they outside the name, Stellantis. They have 4 platforms that are coming up. One of them is a frame platform, so you can do body on frames, which means you can get a truck where you can swap out the bed for whatever weird thing you want to put back there, which is sort of exciting for the trucking industry. They have a Ram 1500 coming. They got a lot of news coming out, and they're spending a ton of money before 2025. I for one,
like
applaud
$36 billion.
That's a lot.
yeah,
Of
yeah,
cash.
a lot of that's a lot. That's like 4 Veyrons. And so yeah, they do have a bunch of really weird like sort of catchphrases for each brand, but
Okay, I was waiting for that because first of all, they have 14 brands now, which I don't think I'd ever counted. 14 brands in the company. And they've got 14 different electrified taglines. And some of these are okay, and some of these are a little bit weird. I like the Jeep one, zero emission freedom. That's kind of cool with their whole freedom
Yeah, I mean
thing.
that fits with
I
Jeep
feel like that works for Jeep.
and
But then it
Dodge. Tear up the streets, not the planet.
woo, take that streets. Of course,
Yeah.
but then it gets really weird. Like a bars
And then-
was heating up people, not the planet.
I don't get that. Is it like they now what?
Well, they're
I like
cooking-
The Chrysler.
they're
Chrysler's
cooking
good,
people.
though. Yeah, Chrysler's good. Clean technology for a new generation of families. Okay, Chrysler. I'll go with that one. I like the Chrysler. I like the Jeep. What's Fiat? It's only green when it's green for all. What?
I don't even know what that means.
What does that mean? Does everyone get a free Fiat so that we're all green? I don't. Does everyone want a free Fiat? I don't think so. I don't understand. all these.
Fiat's going to be all electric. I mean, that's all we know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's some, and Maserati is pretty lame. The best in performance luxury electrified.
Electrified. What is the Alfa Romeo thing? Did they elaborate on that? From 2024, Alfa
No, they didn't.
becomes Alfa E Romeo.
Yeah, they only talked about 6 of the brands with any specifics. Alpha wasn't one of them. Neither was Maserati. They're going to be talking more about them later. But for the U.S., they did talk about Dodge, Ram, and Jeep. So Dodge is finally going to get a new car in 2024.
What?
And Tim Kuniskis, who's the head of the Dodge brand, said, Dodge is not going to sell electric cars. It's selling electric eMuscle. So they're sticking with the muscle car theme, but they're going to use electricity to get you there. And so they're launching an electric muscle car in 2024, and they gave a vague glimpse of something that may or may not be that car. I think one of the interesting details on there. Did you happen to notice the logo on that car in the center of the grille? This little sort of triangle type logo.
No.
It's the Dodge logo that was introduced in 1955 and it was used through the 1960s and into the early 70s. And hasn't been seen for a long time. It's interesting that they're kind of going back to that logo. So there's going to be, we don't know if it's going to be a replacement for the Charger or the Challenger or both, or what else they're going to do. Just that there's going to be at least their first EV is coming in 3 years, and it's going to be an electric muscle car. And they during the section of the presentation where they talked about technology, they talked about the Stella large platform, which is what Dodge is going to use, will be capable of up to 0 to 60 in as little as 2 seconds. So they're clearly going after Tesla. I guess they're tired of Challenger demons being blown away at the drag strip by Model S plaids, I guess.
But would you rather have a Challenger Demon or a Model S Plaid? Which would you rather have, regardless of what it does at the track?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
You mean a current demon
Current
or
right now,
like a
let's-
future electric demon?
A current Demon.
Oh, I would. Oh God, that's
It
hard.
depends.
Because I don't want either, really.
If it's something I have to,
You don't want. No,
Yeah.
you have to pick one, Robbie.
I know. I'm gonna say.
if it's something I have to drive every day, I'd
I'm gonna.
probably go for the Tesla.
Yeah, if I can, and then I would
'cause
get
I
an
don't think,
aftermarket steering wheel. If I just need to get an aftermarket
yeah,
steering
a
wheel, I'll
real
go with the
steering
Tesla.
wheel.
Yeah, I'll go with the Tesla.
But you'd have to change the steering. What
Yeah.
if you can't rip it apart? You have to drive it just like it comes from the OEM.
Oh man.
No, then it's got to be the Demon.
Yeah.
I can't
yeah.
deal with that steering wheel.
That
Okay,
steering
Yoke.
wheel.
see?
It's not safe. It's unsafe.
In
it's a
case
safety
anyone
issue.
thinks the interiors of cars don't matter, these guys just pick their car like, no, steering wheel sucks, I'm out. And that's the deciding factor.
It's not even just sucks. It's unsafe. It's
Yeah.
the opposite of. It's more than just it sucks. It's bad.
Okay.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah. There we
Yeah.
go.
So, Robbie, you were talking about the body on frame, the Stella frame platform, and that's going to be the basis for the Ram 1500 electric, which is coming in 2024, which is obviously later than the F-150 Lightning or the Silverado electric. But they talked about, our competitors are going to be there first with an electric truck, but we're going to be the best. And they talked about a range of up to 500 miles. A big thing they talked about was, focusing on efficiency, getting the most miles per kilowatt hour out of their EVs. So we'll see if they can actually achieve that, and if they can come up with something better than what their competitors are doing with electric trucks.
What did they say? Like
And then
4.2
Jeep.
kilowatt, 4.2 miles per kilowatt hour, something.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the
Which
target.
which is like Tesla, and I think Hyundai is like 4.1 right now, or 4.0. So 4 point something, anything above 4 is good. Efficiency numbers are
Well, especially if in something as big as a full size truck.
Yeah,
that's where it's tough to get that kind of efficiency.
yeah.
And then Jeep, Jeep, as you well know, Nicole's husband just got his Jeep Wrangler 4xe, the first plug-in Jeep in North America. By 2025, there are going to be battery electric versions of Jeeps in every product segment. So from the Renegade up to the Wagoneer, there will be electric Jeeps. So it'll be interesting to see what they come up with there. See how they do those.
I wonder if they'll keep the name Magneto, or if they're afraid that Marvel's going to sue them for the Wrangler, because they have the Magneto concept.
That concept, yeah.
They'll probably just keep it Wrangler, and maybe
you never know.
Just probably the Wrangler E by E. I don't know.
Depends what what I haven't looked at what Marvel's actual trademark is. It may only be for cartoon characters. Because
they have
Magneto's
a very
existed long
specific-
before Marvel Comics.
That's
I don't
true.
think Marvel owns it, because I just randomly Googled Magneto, and there's very many other things with that name in it. So you would think they would have thought about
okay.
that if
Yeah.
they owned the name.
If they have the IP,
So-
but they have the IP specifically for a fictional character as opposed to a fictional concept car. So, all right.
Right. Totally
Yeah.
two different fictional things.
Okay. Any other thoughts on Stellantis and what they're doing?
I think it's kind of cool. I'm happy to see them moving more
Yeah.
EV and having a solid plan for it.
I think that the idea that it
Yeah.
has to be a race at this point to be first in EVs, well, everyone lost that race. Tesla won that race. I mean, and I think we were just sort of settling into everyone like catching up with Tesla, but everyone's catching up at different areas. People don't. If you have a car that's EV this year, you might get some new buyers, but people don't buy a new car every year. There's going to be people in 2 years who need a new car, in 3 years, and 5 years, and whatever, who are sort of transitioning out of either gas vehicles or hybrid vehicles into an EV. So you got some time, but not a lot. You still want to get as many people as possible.
Yeah, I don't think it's a race to like, we have this, you don't, everybody has it. So it's really more a race to who's going to deliver one that for whatever reason is just better features, better drive, better range, faster charging, whatever. Those things start to matter, because just like,
Yeah.
I have one, you don't, doesn't work anymore. Like we all have one. Yeah. Everybody
Yeah.
has one. So you got to
And Stellantis already has a bunch of Stellantis already has a bunch of EVs in Europe.
Yeah.
Under the previous PSA brands, Peugeot, Citroën, DS, and Opel and Vauxhall. And they're in Europe through the first half of this year. Stellantis is actually number 2 in EV sales behind Volkswagen Group. Volkswagen Group is number 1, Stellantis is number 2, Tesla is number 5. So Stellantis actually sells more EVs in Europe than Tesla does by a pretty wide margin. They're just not they're not vehicles that we can buy here, and they're not the type of vehicles that most Americans are interested in, like the E208, compact
and
hatchback,
wasn't
things like
even
that.
here wasn't and correct me if I've used it wrong, but I thought that the Jeep, the Wrangler, was like the best-selling plug-in hybrid in the last month or some such. It just hit some cool landmark number for June.
Yeah.
I think it was the best-selling plug-in.
It was either the best-selling.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it was the best-selling plug-in hybrid. I heard somebody saying that they're getting like a 20% take rate on the 4xe for the Wrangler right now. So like 20% of all the orders for Wranglers are for the plug-in hybrid, which is pretty impressive. I mean,
it's a good car. It's a good Jeep. It's a Jeep.
I think so.
Yeah. It's good enough for the Nicole family.
It's good enough for the Nicole family. My husband has
had
it for exactly 48 hours, and he loves it. So there you go.
Done.
That's all. Is he actually plugging it in?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is there was some confusion about when it was going to arrive, because we ordered this because we didn't have what we wanted, and it was like, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here, it's here. And my husband has not installed a level 2 charger in the house yet, so he's just plugging it in the old-fashioned way. So he charges it overnight, but literally has to charge it overnight because it's essentially trickle charging. But but he drove to work and got to work on almost using, like, he wasn't quite there, and he knew he was going to run out of, electric power. So he just stopped at the mall, got himself a coffee, charged for a little bit, got back in the car, finished driving to work. He's like playing with this. If ever there was evidence that, like, when you get one, suddenly getting that electric range matters, it's the last 48 hours of my husband playing with this that I got this many miles, and I've only used this much gas. And but he does. He plugs it in.
The other day on Twitter, I saw somebody posted that a neighbor just got a 4xe, a Wrangler 4xe, and we went over to talk to him, and his neighbor didn't even know that it was a plug-in hybrid. He wasn't even aware of what it was. He just wanted a Wrangler, and that was what was available. And he bought it, not even realizing it was a plug-in hybrid. And so he asked him, so you're going to plug it in? He said, nah, not even going to bother. It's like, why?
Why wouldn't you?
If you got it, you might as well plug it in.
Right. If you have it, why not
waste.
use that? That seems kind of weird. Well, it's also a guy who bought a car that he didn't know was a plug-in hybrid, so I have a lot of questions there.
Maybe he's not a good...
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
All right. Let's answer a few listener questions and wrap it up.
Okay.
So, first one from Surtur. I like the Maverick with the hybrid powertrain, but will I like the CVT? Are there good CVTs? Define good.
That's what I was. What's good? If they're all CVTs are CVTs.
They're inherently not great.
There are some that are better than others. Some of the Nissans are okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're some of the Nissans that are programmed to behave more like conventional transmissions, are they're okay, because they don't really feel like CVTs,
Yeah.
But most of them are not particularly.
Is there really?
pleasant
There
to
isn't
drive.
one. I don't think I can think of one. I'm like, wow, that is a great CVT. Bring it. That's fantastic. I can only think of CVTs that are less disappointing than others. Like, oh, that one's not so bad.
Yeah.
That one's actually okay. That one I don't mind. I've never walked away and been like, wow,
They did
they're
it.
just like,
They cracked the CVT code.
yeah, I've never thought that in anyone I've ever driven. It's always just like, well, that was not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah, I've been racking my brain since seeing this question this morning, like what's a good CVT? And I'm just like,
Yeah, crickets. You can't think of one. Is there really
I
a
think
good one?
maybe Ford will. I mean, Ford's been doing some pretty great things recently. Maybe they'll crack the code.
I mean, that's true. We're looking like, is there one right this second? None of us have driven the Maverick. Nobody knows what the CVT is going to be like. Maybe all three of us will get in and come out and go, oh my gosh,
They did it.
They did it. They have the perfect CVT. I'm not hoping.
Okay, set aside the question of CVT for a minute. I mean, you've both driven Ford hybrid vehicles, probably hybrid Escape and Fusions and stuff like that over the years. What did you think of driving those vehicles?
Yeah.
That's what I thought about.
That that
I
sums
think
it
if
up.
they can,
But were they offensive?
they weren't offensive. They just weren't.
No, they're not horrible. Like really, a few years ago, like CVTs were just all pretty horrible, and they're collectively all getting less horrible. Like they're a little bit better and a little bit better, but I don't feel like any of them. I just give me an automatic transmission. So far, I just don't feel like the CVTs have the. They never give you the same drive experience that an automatic is. You can tell the difference. Until you can't tell the difference,
Yeah,
like you can't feel it, you can't hear
Yeah.
it, then they're not going to be good.
I think Ford has a potential here because if it is a hybrid that you can program it in a way that the hybrid powertrain kicks in that sort of gives you that low end torque that you get from an automatic transmission or a manual transmission that CVTs sometimes sort of drop the ball on. And if they can figure out how to make it not sound like the engine's going to explode, because
That's the problem. They
Uh,
all sound like that's exactly. I always feel like it sounds like cylinders are just going to go shooting through the hood of your car. Like things are going wrong
Yeah.
underneath there. It
I think
sounds
that-
terrible.
I think the hybrid powertrain is probably the best use of a CVT if you can figure out how to match them up in a way that recreates an automatic transmission feel. I don't know if you
Yeah,
can
and
do
I
it
think
with a just a
generally
gas engine.
Ford. Yeah, generally the Ford, the front wheel drive Ford hybrids, feel more like that. Using the electric motor to fill that low end torque hole, so it doesn't have to do as much of that motor boating effect as you would with just a regular gas engine and a CVT. So it's not revving up to 4,500 RPM and sitting there while you accelerate. It's using the electric motor for more of that. And keep the engine running at a lower speed, and so I think it's less offensive than most and just straight gas engines with a CVT, because and it's a different it's not the same as most CVTs. Most CVTs are it's a steel belt between a pair of pulleys that the pulleys themselves, the two halves of the pulley split apart and move together. The opposite, to change the ratio. So one splits apart, the other moves together. So it changes the drive ratio. This, on hybrids like this, it's a completely different mechanism. It's actually using planetary gears, and one of the two motors in the hybrid drive system is actually acting as a variable ground for the planetary gear. And we don't need to get into all the details, but it works in a very different way from most CVTs. And I think, if you want an idea of what it's likely to feel like, if you can find, an Escape or a Fusion or a C-Max hybrid, from the last few years, and drive one of those, it's probably going to feel pretty much like that. So if you don't mind the way those feel, that's probably what this is going to drive like, because it's the same basic architecture.
I like to think that they'll be better, but fingers crossed that it's better than that. Just because I think Ford's been doing some pretty good stuff recently, and I believe in the likelihood that it might be better.
Yeah.
Okay, I would agree with that ringing endorsement, Robbie.
A ringing endorsement that it would be cool if it was cooler.
It'd be cool if it was cooler. Be cool if that could be.
Come
cooler.
on, man, be cool. Be cool, Ford.
Cool.
We'll reach out to our Ford peeps and
That should be
get
their
right
new
on it.
thing.
Next one is from Dutch Mandel, who was a longtime former editor, I think, or at least maybe managing editor at Auto Week. He asked, what's the likelihood of implementing a single plug standard for EV charging units and vehicles? How can that happen? What companies, institutions are leading the charge?
Leading the charge, but a bump.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
So he's asking. So I mean, we have right now with the DC fast charge, essentially that's standard, where it has the level 2 and level 3 has the two little plugs underneath. I think is that what we're talking about? Like that, or?
Well, I think he's talking about, I'm assuming it's more along the lines of, you've got the Tesla connector, You've got CHAdeMO and you've got CCS. Yeah, and CCS is, it's basically the 1772 with the 2 extra pins.
I feel like CCS is the standard, and it's probably going to, I would think, stay the standard. Even Nissan has sort of decided, okay, we got to put CCS on our vehicles in addition to CHAdeMO, because you could only get a Leaf with CHAdeMO forever, and then you had to go find a CHAdeMO station. And EA has CHAdeMO, plugs at their stations for those folks, but I think CCS is probably going to stay the standard and be the standard. And Tesla is an outlier because Tesla is Tesla. And, even Tesla has to deal with, CCS in Europe. So.
Yeah. Here in the U.S., the only 2 brands that have ever used CHAdeMO are Nissan and Mitsubishi for their plug-in hybrids. And both of those are going away. The Leaf is probably still going to be CHAdeMO until the current generation is replaced. But the new Aria that's coming out, that's using CCS. So, basically, aside from Tesla, it's going to be CCS across the board. In Europe, regulators actually mandated a standard connector. They said everybody's going to use CCS. I mean, it's a slightly different variant of CCS than we have here because it has to support 3-phase AC instead of the single phase like we use here, but it uses the same communication standards. And it's not like very many people drive between the U.S. and Europe. So, a car that's in Europe is likely to stay there.
Stay there, probably. Probably.
Yeah. So in Europe, it's standardized because regulators said this is the standard. I don't think that's going to happen here. I mean, here, most of the industry agreed on CCS, except for Nissan, and they're jumping on board now, unless some regulator comes forth and says everything's got to be CCS. You're probably not going to see that happen here, I don't think. Maybe at some point, Tesla will just give up and adopt CCS, but I wouldn't hold my breath as long as Elon's still breathing.
Yeah, I don't see them opening up to other. I wrote an article a couple of years ago where how much money Tesla could make if they opened up their charging stations to other automobiles and supported CCS, because you could come into a Tesla, essentially a showroom every time you needed to charge along the Tesla supercharging network if they had like a Model 3 and you showed up in a Chevy Bolt. But it's a lot of, I talked to Tesla about it, and it really just comes down to the software. The hardware will support it as long as you put a CCS adapter on there. And it's down to the software, so that Tesla has to support the software for the vehicle has to support the software to Tesla, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, and they said, oh, we'll let anyone charge on our network, but they haven't really done anything to make that a reality because they want everyone to be using Tesla's thing. And that happening has long since passed.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the CCS standard was developed, through an SAE standards committee. So, a bunch of automakers and suppliers all participated in that process, developing that standard. So that's why everybody that participated in that is using that. Yeah. All right. Last question. Somebody named Rebecca Drives. I don't know who she is. But said she just rented a car for the first time in a while. It's a Nissan Rogue Sport. It has lane departure warning, blind spot monitoring, and emergency braking, but no push-button start or remote locks. Basic infotainment. Is that the best strategy for rental cars? Keep it stripped or a chance to show tech and features?
I always think rental cars would be a great way to show new stuff, but I think the problem is that people aren't looking to play with a rental car when they're, you're getting the car because you want to take it for a drive to get you someplace, generally speaking, shorter distances. You go someplace and you need to rent a car to drive around town, or I don't know how much people would play to see all the features that if you got a really fully featured infotainment system, are you really going to look at all those things as you're just driving around visiting grandma for the weekend?
I think rental cars, default should have CarPlay or Android Auto support.
And they
then,
don't.
and
Yeah.
that's all I want, because I have everything I need on my phone, and going in and being like, okay, is this something where I can talk to it? Oh, wait, I have to talk to a script. Oh, I have to do this. Oh, I have to pull over and push the buttons. And I just want to be able to plug in my phone. I think drivability and the interior, how nice the interior is, I think that's where you can really sort of like, hey, look how nice the
Yes.
interior of the new Nissan Rogue is, or how nice it drives. I think that's where you can sort of shine
I
as an
think the
automaker.
interior, yeah, the interior would be huge because we're normally driving, when we get press cars, we're generally driving higher trims. They're not giving us the base model of any kind of press car. So we're getting pretty nicely equipped cars
Very
that are
rarely.
interiors,
Yeah.
all the fancy, right? And the few times that I've had to rent a car, they feel like they could be really brand new. Like no one's really driven it. They're in great shape. But it's just like, good Lord, when you look at the base trim, it does nothing to sell the car that I'm driving. Or if you had the leather seats, that might convince somebody that, hey, this is actually an all right kind of car. Like I do think they miss out on the opportunity to show what they can do when the only cars they've got are these base models that just don't look as nice inside. You
Yeah.
know, people buy them obviously, but that's not a great way to sell a car.
Yeah.
Well, I think the problem is, people, that are going on a vacation trip, taking the family to Disney World or somewhere, whatever, going on a trip. They're going to rent a car. They go on Travelocity or Expedia or wherever, and book their flights. Book a rental car. It's like, okay, I need a compact crossover. What's the cheapest one I can get? Oh, Avis has this Rogue Sport for $120 a day, or whatever they go for the cheapest one of the type that the class that they need. And so if consumers want the cheapest possible rental car, the rental car companies aren't going to buy the high trim levels and rent them at those cheap rates. They're going to buy the stripped base models. And occasionally they will have higher trim levels, but they come at a much higher price point, and most people aren't renting those cars.
But you'd
They're
wonder
renting the base
if
models.
they somehow did it, if an automaker said, okay, look, we're going to give you these instead of the stripped down base model. We'll give you this slightly better than that model. We'll give it to you at a price that you can still make it, you can still have the top trim and rent it out for more, but here's a middle instead of a bottom trim. Let's put that in your fleet. We'll give it to you at a cost that makes it worthwhile for you as if it was a base trim. That would that benefit the automaker that now they're, if they're still able to rent those on the cheap, because would it sell cars?
Or just make the base level better. How about that?
That works too.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is happening. I mean, we talked about earlier, about the Taos and some of the other entry level crossovers. Manufacturers are starting to put more and more of these features, especially the driver assist stuff, but even things like a touchscreen with CarPlay and Android Auto support. As standard equipment. It might be a smaller touchscreen, it might be a 7-inch instead of an 8 or 9 or 10-inch screen, but they're putting that as standard. Like the Taos is an example. The base Taos comes with a 7-inch screen. The upper trim levels gets an 8-inch, or maybe it was the Civic I was looking at. But they have standard driver assist. They have standard touchscreen with our CarPlay and Android Auto. I mean, all the Hyundais and Kias, the base models now all have that.
Yeah.
Hondas have that on all their models. So I think as manufacturers move to making that kind of equipment standard, some of those cars are going to filter into the rental fleets. It's only Nissan. Nissan has sold a lot of cars into rental fleets over the last 5-7 years, and they have continued to offer models that, like the Rogue Sport, base Rogue Sport, that are missing some of these features. But I think the current generation Rogue Sport, that's probably going to get replaced next year because they just launched a new one in Europe. You can get the Rogue Sport with push button start and with the nicer infotainment and everything. I think we'll see that in the next generation. I think the next generation, they won't have a key. It'll have a touch screen. So hopefully that problem will get better.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's all we got for this week. Any final thoughts?
No,
Nope.
none.
Not a
zip.
one.
No thoughts
right.
at all.
Nothing. I'm devoid of thought.
Then we will talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.